Welcome to Truth Nation, episode 6. My name is Bill Bodner. With me is the Chief, Mark Garrett. Chief, were you part of were you trained with the U.S. National Cycling Team? Do I have that right?
Yeah, it's true. This is about 600 years ago, but yeah, U.S.
Okay.
National Bicycling Team.
Did you have any affiliation with Lance Armstrong when you were on the team? Well, he was postal. That
No,
was it.
as a matter of
Okay.
fact, you know what? It's so interesting you bring that up because I was as clean as they come in the sport of cycling, and I was around a lot of drug use, and I never touched anything you couldn't buy over the counter at GNC.
Yeah, there was a comment in our Twitter feed. You're looking pretty jacked, I guess. I don't know
Exactly. Well,
what
I
the source
think
of that
here's the
was.
confusion. Here's the confusion, because at some point in the past, I was actually a female, and so that's what
Right,
happened, and so people were a
right.
little confused. I understand, but yeah, matter
On
of
that
fact,
note, yeah.
I put this Saran wrap shirt on today just to piss off the people who said that I was on steroids, but whatever.
Oh, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. Hey, today, Mark, we're going to talk about social media, child sexploitation, and drugs. And I think the important thing for us to talk about is Section 230 actually protecting the people perpetrating these crimes, and is it endangering our children? And if you were to look at this, or actually, when I first looked at this topic from the outside, I thought, man, here is something that Mark and I may disagree on pretty strongly, because I feel like in this space, and I know you're not a big government regulation guy. You're on the record saying there should not have been a national speed limit in 1974. It's unconstitutional. But I thought, hey, this is something where we need more regulation. It's an emerging space. Our kids are at risk. And the point of today's show is I want people to understand, if you take nothing else away, take this story that I'm going to tell in the first 10 minutes and understand it is actually a law that's on the books now that's enabling this. In my opinion, Section 230, a law that is on the books now, is actually being misapplied, and that is what is endangering our children. So the reality is, Mark, we may end up agreeing that we need less regulation in this space. We need to let the free market kind of decide what's appropriate and what's not. We need to put some of the liability on the social media platforms, and kind of see if that will even the playing field a little bit. So I'm going to tell a story. I don't want to give too much context, but I have to give a little. So there's a current lawsuit in Los Angeles County Superior Court. It is 65 families who have lost children to fentanyl that was sold over Snapchat. Okay. They sued Snapchat, and the kind of basis of their lawsuit is, their claim is that well, I guess the way to put it is it's a product liability lawsuit. What they're saying is this is an unsafe product. Snap, the parent company, knows it's unsafe and continues to market it to children. It was thought that Section 230 would protect Snap from any potential litigation. A couple weeks ago, a judge ruled and said this case will go forward. So it's really a groundbreaking decision. And I want to now tell a story about something that came up in this lawsuit. Some of the contention, there's a couple hotly contested kind of issues in this lawsuit. One is a specific feature of Snap called Quick Add. And what that is it's Snap's algorithm, and let's not even call it an algorithm today. Let's call it artificial intelligence. It's the artificial intelligence that Snap uses to match people with users and build their network. So if I'm a user on Snap, it's going to make suggestions who my friends should be. How the artificial intelligence is making those suggestions, what data it's looking at to make those suggestions, is a hotly contested topic in this lawsuit. Another issue, and we're going to hold this one till the very end, and that's my tease to get people to watch the whole show or listen to the whole show today. It's called Snap Maps, and ladies and gentlemen, I will explain to you how drugs are being trafficked, how drugs are being sold to children on Snapchat with that Snap Map feature. And it's fascinating. Parents out there, if you have a teenage child, a soon to be teenage child, listen to this podcast, because it will change the way you parent and change the way you handle social media in the home. So the plaintiffs, let's call them the plaintiffs, group of parents, the plaintiffs in the lawsuit were, in their opinion, probably given my read of the documents in the lawsuit, given the runaround by Snap. They were wanting answers about how the artificial intelligence works. So here's what they did, Mark. They went out, they bought a brand new telephone, never before used. They put a brand new telephone number on it, never before used. They sat down, they downloaded Snap on the phone. They created a new account with a new email address, never before used to anything, not connected with anything. They identified as a 16-year-old female. Okay. So their idea, Mark, was to give the platform, to give the artificial intelligence as little information as possible about who they were, other than they're a 16-year-old female. And let's see who that artificial intelligence matches us up with or invites to be friends with us, who they suggest we should be friends with. So they did this experiment, and as they joined, of course, the app, as we all know, it asked, "Do you want to sync contacts?" Now, just to be clear, they had no contacts in this phone, but they said no, they didn't want to sync contacts anyway. Again, the goal to give that artificial intelligence as little information as possible. They join, within minutes, they have 200 quick add requests. That is 200, the artificial intelligence selected 200 people and recommended them to be their friends. Here's what they got. Plaintiff alleges that many of the quick add recommendations appeared on their face to belong to predatory users based on terms and emojis indicating sexual solicitation and drug trafficking. A few days later, so they didn't accept any of these friend recommendations right away. They waited for a few days. A few days later, several of the friend recommendations were accepted, and almost immediately, this user received nude photos, and in one case, a video of an adult male Snap user masturbating, right? So
Jeez.
here's the issue, Mark. I want people to understand that this is not a public bulletin board where people post things for other individuals to search for. This is not an internet service provider like Spectrum or Frontier who has no responsibility for what other people are posting on the internet. This is artificial intelligence. What specific things it's using to make these friend recommendations, we don't know. But think of this, Mark, a 16-year-old female, the algorithm, not the 16-year-old female, but the artificial intelligence or the algorithm put her in a position where predatory people were almost immediately in contact with her when she joined the platform. Now, one further thing, I'm going to go back in time. That was done just last year. That was an experiment they did, quote, an undercover experiment they did in June 23. When 2 years earlier, this same group of parents, or some of these parents, it's not really clear to me exactly who, met with Snap. And I'm going to read to you a quote from the lawsuit. And again, I'm doing this because right up front in this show, I want people to understand what the danger is that's out there and how your children don't have to be seeking these things out. The artificial intelligence is actually doing the seeking and forwarding and pushing this content to them in many cases without them even requesting it, looking for it, or anything. So in April 2021, three Snap executives met by Zoom with a group of parents, and these are parents who lost their children to fentanyl poisoning. The Snap executives in attendance were Jennifer Stout, Sophia Gross, Aaron Altshuler, and there was a group of maybe 10 or 7 to 10 parents who had lost children. The vice president of global safety, Jennifer Stout, started the meeting by telling the parents, and this is in the court documents, that Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act immunized Snap from civil liability. She said that Snap is a host company and it is not responsible under Section 230 because the creators are the ones posting content and not Snapchat. She also repeatedly referred to Snap as a small company, and I just threw that in there because it seems a little disingenuous. Mark, this
I'd say so.
company has the company has over a $27 billion market cap right now, right? It's a $27 billion company. So Snap In Snap's opinion, they are completely immune from civil liability. So, Mark, what motivation do they have to stop this? We saw this in our second episode with Crime of the Century.
Right.
When there's no motivation, hey, they're trying to maximize the value of the company. They're trying to maximize profits. Their algorithm, according to the court documents that I looked at, is pushing dangerous content to children, and they're telling parents, "Hey, it's not us. We're immune." Does that blow your mind like it blew my mind when I first saw that?
Well, you know what? Given what we've seen over the last decade, especially in social media, I'll be honest with you, Bill. It doesn't blow my mind. It disgusts me because this is, in other words, we're kind of used to this trend now. We're used to social media platforms, algorithms, which we talk about, offline with their own show and things like this. Everybody does who hosts a podcast or is on social media, things like this. So we're kind of used to these systems. What's happened now is, of course, with AI, it's accelerated at way more than lightning speed. Of course, I think it's important to go back and give a little bit of foundational information about 230,
Mhm.
though, as we talk about this, about really the origins, because it goes back almost 30 years to the mid 90s when the legislation, the genesis of the legislation about 230, and I have some of that. I know you do too in front of me. We're both looking at so much information because there is endless information about 230 and about social media algorithms and about AI. There's so much. Try to boil it down, but you go back and I've got my hot little hands here, my articles here. It's like, what is Section 230? So in 96, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which you referred to, helps protect online companies from liability arising from what is posted on their platforms. Many experts point to Section 230 as a foundational component to how the internet works today. So there are a few things here. This is really important for our audience and for us to really appreciate and understand. So Section 230 provides immunity to internet companies in two ways. Provider or user of an interactive computer service, basically an online platform, can't be treated as the publisher or speaker. Now, this is important. So the provider, the platform cannot be treated as the publisher. In other words, they cannot be treated as the author of the creator of the content. They're only a conduit. They're the pipeline carrying the water. They don't own the water, so to speak. I mean, just try to put it in simplest terms that even I can understand. Of information provided by a third party. Two, providers and users of interactive computer services can't be liable for voluntarily taking down content if the provider believes in good faith that the information is obscene or otherwise objectionable. In other words, this legislation gave the ability to companies like Snapchat, like Snap, or all the other platforms
Mhm.
to take down things they deem obscene. This is really, really important. This was an off ramp, so to speak, for companies to clean things up that they thought were being posted on their platforms or via their platforms that were obscene. This goes back to what you're talking about right now with this male adult masturbating to someone who he thinks is a 16-year-old female. But apparently, Snap left it up there. So there's more, and I have plenty, but I don't want to dominate the airtime here. I want to go back and forth, but I have some more stuff here about what 230 does. But basically, it says that these platforms are not the publishers; they're not the creator of content, so generally they cannot be held liable for what's on there. And there are some exceptions we can get into more. So,
So, Mark, my
um,
my question about that though, because when I look at it, and first off, in 95, 96, we first have to think about what platforms there actually were back then,
right.
and did we have artificial AI deciding what would be pushed to people back then. And finally, my understanding of it almost was like when this law was created, that it was really designed. Now we're using the word platform today, but I don't know that that word as an entity even you know existed. I don't know if there was really such a thing as a social media platform back then, besides maybe AOL or something like that. Was not the reason this law wasn't it created to protect ISPs or internet service providers, almost like the Spectrums, the Frontiers, the AT&T, the Verizon, the people who were providing the quote bandwidth to put this message out there, and not so much the company, because it gets I almost feel like a law has been taken and these platforms have, and I don't know how they've been allowed to get away with this, but I almost feel like they weren't around in 95, 96, but I feel like they've taken the lead in redefining what what a provider is, what a service is versus what an actual product is. And I almost think of it like, I don't know, if you're a magazine, right? And you have in a writer, but if this writer's a freelance writer, Mark, they write for all different magazines. They're not an employee of yours. They write an article, you buy it, you publish it, and this is the old days, Mark. You mail that magazine out by US mail. My thought on this law, or Section 230, when it was written, not how it's being interpreted today, but when it was written, is that it was to protect the mail, the carrier service. In this case, it's almost a magazine getting protection, where they're saying, we didn't write this article, we're just housing it on our pages. It's just on our pages for anyone to see, but we didn't write it, so we're immune. And that step or that interpretation, I feel, is completely inappropriate for what a social media platform is today. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're having so many issues. In your read on 230, am I off base on that? Have you seen an interpretation similar to mine, or do you think it was intended to protect the AOL back then, I guess, or what today is a platform?
Well, it's an interesting comparison to the U.S. Postal Service, but here's what I'll say about the U.S. Postal Service. In other words, if you write a fraudulent check to somebody, or let's just say a fraudulent check, and you
Mhm,
send it through the mail, you've committed two felonies. One is the forgery on the check, right? The second is you've committed mail fraud. So anytime you use the postal system to commit a crime, through their service, it's a federal offense. It's mail fraud in
mhm,
addition to the underlying crime. The difference here, and I think the reason the 230 came into existence, Bill, is because unlike the U.S. Postal Service that can't, well, as far as we know, they can't actually look into an envelope, other than X-ray and things like that for hazardous materials or stuff like that. They don't look at every piece of correspondence, or hopefully any correspondence that's in an envelope in a container. There's no way the postal service should know what's in a supposedly confidential container, right?
mhm.
The difference here is that anything that is posted on any platform, any email or any image, any correspondence, theoretically can be seen by electronically by the provider. Now, I could be wrong about that about emails. I guess theoretically that should be confidential. They can't see them. But not too long after this 230 was enacted, I mean, we got into social media very, very quick in the
Mhm,
early 2000s. And we know for a fact, by the way, through algorithms, even before AI, we know for a fact that these platforms manipulate things based on content and based on networks, for advertising purposes, just like television does, even before artificial intelligence. So we know there's a hand in there's an active part of social media that's not part of what, historic mail service, things like that. The comparison you made, it's a fair comparison, but not a complete comparison. There's an active role, and this is why 230 even became an issue. The idea of 230, how do we regulate, how do we deal with internet providers? Because it's an electronic platform that understandably the providers can actually see.
Mhm.
So again, we know factually that these things are manipulated. I say manipulated doesn't mean it's evil, but they are actually modified and manipulated for income, for advertising, for networking, things like this. Everything from Twitter to LinkedIn to, of course, Facebook and everything else in Meta. So that's the difference. But the reason that 230 was there was to cut a deal with these providers. Okay, we won't hold you accountable for illegal content, obscene content, if you don't manipulate unfairly content that is posted and you don't allow the obscene or inappropriate content to be posted. That's what we're getting into now from my point of view, is that these platforms, these providers have not lived up to that end, where they have been objective when it
Mhm.
comes to things that they don't agree with or do agree with. We know for a fact they've not been objective there, so they've not lived up to that part of the bargain.
I would agree with that, and let me also say this, Mark, and I think you kinda touched on it there. The goal of the algorithm, and we like I said earlier, we talk about this anytime it's big business and there's the potential for people being harmed. As users, we have to remember the goal of the algorithm is to build engagement around the platform, whatever platform it is. The goal of that algorithm is to drive content, push content in such a way that it builds engagement, because that's how they monetize the platform. That should be a little scary to people, because there's also, and a lot, and don't get me wrong, I'm not, when I say that a 16-year-old or someone identifying as a 16-year-old female, I don't know, it's not clear from the court papers if this was really an adult doing like an undercover thing. I don't I'm not saying that Snap purposefully pushed pornographic or sexually explicit content to a 16-year-old. What I'm saying is that they need to acknowledge that there's unintended consequences. When they have an end goal in mind of creating engagement, and that's what the algorithm is geared upon, that artificial intelligence, and by the way, you were making a distinction earlier about AI versus the algorithm. No, in my world, no. AI, the algorithm 10 years ago was just more basic artificial intelligence than it is today. It is artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
When
By the way,
when
I agree with that
Yeah,
completely.
when that artificial intelligence is driving content, there are going to be unintended consequences, and I understand that. But what we need platforms to then make adjustments to it. And I don't know, there's a part I found of Section 230, and let me know. Hopefully, this is accurate information. I'm sure you'll let me know if it's not. And it's in quotes here. The part that I didn't hear you mention is, even if the provider fails to take action after receiving notice of the harmful or offensive content. So what this is saying is, if in the case that I talked about, a male adult sending sexually explicit content to a 16-year-old girl, if there was a complaint made to the platform about that, and they did nothing, Mark, they did absolutely nothing, and that person sent content to additional people, the company, or according to Section 230, the way it's written now, that company would still not be liable for any civil damages. To me, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. Am I wrong about that part of the law? Did you see that
No, I
that,
mean,
that
in my
last?
opinion, you opened the show talking about, my opposition to the federally mandated 55-mile-an-hour speed limit 50 years ago or so, and I absolutely still am
Mhm.
opposed to that. Doesn't mean that I'm opposed to the federal government being involved in certain aspects of our lives, and this is one where I think, because of the nature of the internet, social media, that it is totally appropriate. But yeah, I think yeah, I think you're right. It is crazy that, according to what you said, and again, I don't have that one in front of me, about 230, and these companies not being held civilly liable, even if they don't take action when quote unquote, I put quote unquote there for a reason, harmful content, because what is harmful content? I think there's some things that
Mhm.
anybody with two brain cells and just a little bit of introspection can agree is harmful, especially talking about children. But the idea that they wouldn't be held liable civilly when something like this, if this is an example,
Mhm.
that is mind blowing. That is shocking to me.
And Mark, how about the piece with, what I've heard over the years is that the comparison to a town square, right?
Mhm.
That it's just the platform is just a town square where people come to post information and they can see what other people are thinking, what other people are posting. But do you feel that when once a once a platform starts determining what it's going to push, and if they push something that's harmful, don't you think that that coverage of Section 230 should dissolve? Because how if it's their if it's their algorithm, if it's their computer program
Mhm.
that is pushing this content out to children, it's not children searching for it.
Right.
It's not children happening to see it. It's uh, being purposefully sent to them by an algorithm who doesn't know probably that it's dangerous, I'm assuming. All it knows is, hey, if I push this, science data tells me I'm going to build engagement, and that's what the creators want.
Well, of course, Bill, and this goes right back to the very genesis, the very beginning of 230 in 1996. And the word publisher is what, in my opinion,
Mhm.
I'm not a lawyer, but this is what it all hinges on. Once you start pushing, and even if, as you said, even if you start knowingly allowing AI to manage your platforms, to me, that is, in other words, it's culpability just by ignorance or by default. That in my opinion, that it really is publishing. In other words, you're taking part in actually creating the content. You are a part of that creation process. If you allow these systems, like you said, algorithm AI, the old algorithm before AI was just just the beginning of what we
Mhm.
consider AI now. It was all AI. That is a part of the publishing process. That to me is a willful intent to provide information to users, and not just to be a conduit. You are in the creation process. There's no doubt in my mind, and again, that's just my opinion.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe somebody who's actually gone to law school and has more common sense would disagree with me. But that's what, to me, what it hinges on is the word publisher. This is what it
Right.
comes down to. So I mean, can you turn AI off if you are Snap or any other? I don't. I
I
assume
mean,
you
your
can.
business goes away. You can't
Yeah,
because your business goes
this is what it comes
no.
down to, Bill.
Right.
Your business goes away.
Right.
So that's what we're left with here. Is it a willful decision? Is it a willful decision to let these systems run completely autonomously in exchange for making more money? That's what it comes down to. Now, listen, you're right. 30 years ago, when 230 came into existence, nobody, I don't think, well, maybe a few people in the world could have envisioned what we're dealing with now with AI.
Right.
But 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 here we are. So do we modify 230? Do we have to catch up now with the scientific realities that these platforms, these providers are dealing with? Probably, and I have some of those proposals in front of me about modifying 230. But
Talk
it
to me
comes
about
down
them.
to, again, are these platforms, are these providers part of the creation and dissemination or creation process, or are they not? I argue they most certainly are.
I would argue they are too. And I don't know when you use the word creation, it's tough. Like I can see some smart lawyers making a strong argument that these platforms are not in the creative process. They're not in
Mhm.
the creative process. But where I think the liability should come back in is when the company takes an active role in, and it's not just my thought on the origin of 230 was I probably already said it 5 times, but the public bulletin board, putting something up where people can see it. Look at it like Craigslist, Mark, in 1995. If you were looking for something, you get on the computer, you search for it. So you took a proactive step to search for it. Now, if you got something back that was illegal, harmed you, whatever, well, you still searched for it. What I'm saying, where I feel like there should be a strong case that this protection gets dissolved, is when the company is pushing content to you that you did not search for. You did not seek it out. And when that content is dangerous and it harms you, and you never looked for it in the first place, you never gave any indication that you wanted anything to do with it, and you're harmed by it, you have to have some recourse against the person that forwarded that to you. That's what I feel. Tell me about, because I have not done a lot of research on what options are out there, or what potential there is to move away from this or craft this in a way that it kind of addresses today's technology a little better.
Well, by the way, the way you actually put the word creation into context was better than what I said. And when I said creation, you're right. Listen, someone actually puts together some content and they post it. That's creation. I think what I was talking about, and I'm glad you clarified this. In other words, it's the creation of the relationship, and this is what you said about. I wasn't asking for this.
Right.
I'm 16 years old. I'm not looking for a 45-year-old man to show me his genitals. I didn't ask for any of this. You you facilitated this coming into my device
Right.
without my request. And that's a long throw from where we were 30 years ago with 230. So,
And before we jump onto that, let me
mhm,
mention something else too, Mark, is and this is not a Section 230 related problem, but and I hope I didn't throw you off your thought process there. But
no.
age verification, like just
Mhm.
in a general sense, Mark, do you feel like a 13-year-old should be able to get, and here's an example I gave. I did a piece for a local TV show here last week about this very issue. And I said, when a teenager goes in a liquor store and tries to buy alcohol, they're asked for ID, or let's say they're just asked for their birthday.
Mhm.
If they give a birthday that says they're 14, they're not told, "Oh, try again." And then they give one, "Oh, okay, I'm 16. No, try again. Well, I'm 18. Try again. I'm 21. Got it. You're good to go." There's no age verification process on here now, and no parental consent needed at
Mhm.
all, and no, really, one of the allegations against Snap that I read in the court documents, and it wasn't, it was very, let's say it was a loose allegation. It was that perhaps, I gotta be careful how I say this, perhaps there's things called third-party monitoring tools. So as a
Mhm.
parent, you can buy these tools, you can put them on your child's phone, and you can monitor what they're doing on social media.
Mhm.
One of the questions in the lawsuit, I'll put it that way, one of the questions in the lawsuit is, does Snap actively try to thwart these tools by
Mhm.
reprogramming and doing software updates? If that's happening, again, that's a situation where parents are trying to take an active step in parenting and prevent harm, and this company is circumventing that or thwarting that, but then at the same time telling them, "Hey, we're not responsible." The other thing specific to Snap, and then we'll move on from it, is the disappearing message, like the feature that's so
Right.
key to their sales, to what they do, to how they have interest with this younger generation. And I think I saw some Snap documents that suggest that maybe 90% of teenagers, 13 to 17, have a Snap account. The disappearing message feature is a fascinating thing, because in this case of the 16-year-old girl, the sexually explicit material that was sent to her, a parent gets involved, a parent now that I Mark, that's a serious crime, right?
Mhm.
That's a serious crime. You're using the internet to send sexually explicit sexual data content to a minor. Guess what? It's gone. As
Mhm.
soon as the The 16-year-old girl opened it and looked at it. After that, it disappeared. It disappeared off the server. It snapped the same time. So there's no record of it anywhere. If someone wanted to pursue a criminal case or a civil case against the creator
Mhm.
later, is that something that in the internet space needs to be addressed? Like, does there have to be, do you think, some type of records retention or age verification things or parental monitoring tools? How do we protect our children with technology moving so fast?
Yeah, it's a great question, and from a technical point of view, a lot of this is over my head. I know we have our
It's over
team
my
back there.
head too, but I mean
Yeah,
that doesn't
Anthony, and
let's not let that stop us,
yes,
right?
exactly. I'm going to give my opinion. Damn it, you better listen. Although I don't know what I'm talking about. Look, so we have Anthony and Vince back there, our producers, our social media guys, things like this, because we don't know what the hell we're doing when it comes to getting this stuff done. Thank God for those guys. And so, but from a logical point of view, look, let's go back to that feature about the deletion, the disappearing
Yeah.
information. That was Snapchat's, that was their initial selling point. That
Yep.
was their market niche.
Yep.
And look, from a free market point of view, because I'm a free market kind of guy, I say so be it. If that's your selling point and people want to use that platform, that's fine. However, just like you said about an underage kid going in to buy a 6-pack of beer or something like that, there are specific laws that they're statutory. Listen, you're 18, you're 21, you have these things that are statutory that affect only a certain segment of the population. Again, I'm talking about age right here. And we've all had to, you're whatever it is, you're doing a financial transaction online, with your bank or whatever it is. We've all had to do the identification verification process
Hmm.
electronically. Everybody
Hmm.
probably listening to this has had to do that at one point or another for legitimate, basic wholesome reasons.
Hmm.
Why that would not be a requirement with any provider when it comes to sensitive information for um, obscene information, whatever it is beyond me. I don't have the answer to it, but I agree with you. It should be part of the process. And again, that Snapchat deletion feature, that was their market niche, which accelerated their growth as a company. Again, philosophically, I don't have any problem with it, just like I don't have any problem with a 21-year-old buying beer.
Hmm.
However, going back to what you said, for certain cases, there absolutely ought to be a verification process, and maybe that'll come out here in this lawsuit.
Hmm. So what about modifications to 230, Mark?
So,
Where
I
where
pulled
where
up
can
this
where can
this
we go?
yeah, you know what? I pulled up an article. It's actually it's so weird. It's so scary to say it's 2 years ago
Hmm.
because it is February 18th, 2022 from the Hartford is the publication. And I was reading about 230 and things like this. It's almost already 2 years old. It seems like it's yesterday. But a couple of things they were talking about. Now, again, this is really before the, uh, you know, this not revelation, but this evolution of AI, things like this. But it talks about the future of 230 because we're pretty good. Even 2 years ago, we're kind of getting close to where we are now. People can see it coming. The future of Section 230 and its impact to the tech industry. So Congress is considering 14 bills. Now, again, this is 2 years ago, and I was looking up so much stuff. I didn't actually have time to follow up on where these bills are or if they're gone. But 14 bills during the 21-22 that could amend Section 230. These bills are aimed to either repeal, limit the scope, impose new regulations of 230. And that's what I was talking about a minute ago about we've accelerated so quickly here. We may need to completely rework.
Hmm.
So, what a couple of examples here. So, for example, disincentivizing internet service censorship of online users and restrictions on Speech and Expression Act or the Discourage Act aims to remove Section 230 protections for market dominant computer services that manipulate algorithms to censor certain materials or viewpoints. Now, again, this
Yeah.
came out of the 2020 presidential campaign cycle, things like this, the
Yeah.
allegations about certain platforms that were manipulating and pretty much even those platforms now, most of them admitted that well, there was some manipulation for disinformation and blah, 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 blah. Let me decide what's disinformation in my own life. Okay, I'm big enough
Right.
to do that. But anyway, that's a different story. Another bill, the 21st Century Foundation for the Right to Express, Engage in Free Speech, or the 21st Century Free Speech Act, acts to repeal Section 230 completely. It would also reclassify internet platforms as common carriers, requiring them to provide services to anyone without discrimination against individual users or classes of users based on political views, religious affiliation, and religion. Now, this stuff may sound a little bit off topic from what we're talking about, we're kind of deep in the weeds here about internet predators and what role do different platforms play in preventing or allowing or turning a blind eye or things like that, publishers, not publishers. But what this talks about now is these providers getting back to doing what they were supposed to do, completely objective, with allowing things to be posted and being a filter for things that are illegal or certainly inappropriate age based.
Mhm.
And in my opinion, that's not what's happening. These platforms are clearly biased at the core. Now, how much they stay in the lines based on, certain political pressures and advocacy groups fighting back and lawyers fighting back, that can be discussed on another show. But certainly they lean one way or another, and people are fighting to keep them objective all the time. So they're not even doing that. They're not even doing that from what I can tell. In addition, they are not living up to their end of the bargain from 30 years ago when it comes to not allowing this type of content that we're talking about on their platforms. And, you know, even to some extent with AI now really being a part of that content flourishing. And this has just gotten way, way outside of what 230 was intended to do, in my opinion.
Right. So you think that because I've always, I've when I hear, I don't know. Hey, I want to. I definitely agree with you that there's been censorship along political lines of social media content. Right. To me, there's no doubt about it. But then I see situations like what I see with the exploitation of children online, and I think if the dollar is king, then isn't the dollar king? In other words, if there is it really that important that they're willing to give up money, give up profitability by limiting content from certain political views or whatever it is? Is that what the argument is? That they're
Yes.
willing to sacrifice it is. So
In
there's you
my
so that
in my
that they're
opinion,
willing to sacrifice profits
yes.
to okay.
Yes. And look, I think we can see that factually now because when we had the advent of all these other platforms in the last, 2 or 3 or 4 years that may have divergent political views, ideological views from some of the more legacy platforms,
Mhm.
we see the free market actually working. I It's a great question, Bill, about, in other words, what is it worth ideologically to a
That's
company to give up
right. That's what I'm saying.
profits?
Because
It's a great
we're
yeah,
saying on the one hand, they're endangering children to maximize profits. That's basically what I'm saying. I'm
yes,
saying they're endangering children to maximize profits. That's a pretty strong statement, right?
yes,
But we're saying they're not willing to give up some manner of manipulation of political content to do the same thing.
100%. And
Mm.
I think this is where ideology is so important. And by the way, it's important to acknowledge it that ideology plays a role in almost everyone's daily lives, whether or not the individual is particularly ideological or not. But the owners, the the people behind these different platforms, it's more important to them, in my mind, from an ideological, a political point of view, to push that agenda than it is to maximize profit. Now, I say that believing that they believe that they can do both. In
Mhm,
other words, from their point of view, the majority of people out there, in the United States or Western civilization, the world, you take your segment of the world population, are more in line with their particular individual ideological views than are not. And so
mhm,
for them, it's a win-win. But I still think, I mean, in their mind, it's a win-win. But I still think that even if they believe that they will lose some level of profitability, they would still push these agendas. They would still censor. They would still manipulate information. They would still say that, if Mark Garrett feels that, this alternative to COVID-19, this alternative medicine should be tried, that's different disinformation. That's dangerous. No, it's not. It's my opinion, but they are so ideological that they're willing to chance it that enough people would not agree with that position and lose that segment of their users.
mhm.
I believe that wholeheartedly, and that's just exactly what's happened. Now, what's happened since you have had all these, I'll just say these smaller, what's the word? Not cafe. There's a word for it,
Boutique,
but what's that? Boutique. Thank you so
boutique.
much. Style platforms. So many of them, they really have taken some of that market share from, again, the legacy platforms, these like legacy companies. And I think what's happened to some extent, that censorship has been reduced now because they don't want to lose that market share. Look at the pushback. Look at the pushback from our media when Elon Musk was in the process of acquiring Twitter. The
Mhm,
world's going to come to an end. This man's going to manipulate everything. He's going to censor everybody, so forth and so on. They did not want the free market to have its way. And namely, they didn't want Elon Musk to have his way. By the way, someone who's certainly not ideologically conservative or Republican or things like this. I think most people would say that he's kind of been a loose cannon in so many ways throughout his professional life. But they didn't want that introduced. And then you get the name calling for all the other platforms out there that are not in line with the traditional platforms. It's like, my God, what is it you are afraid of? What exactly is it you are afraid of? And what they're afraid of is a loss of market dominance. Here's the thing: even if they are completely, they want to censor anything that they are opposed to, these legacy platforms, as long as they own 95% of the market, who cares? If
mhm.
you want to use social media, you have to use one of these platforms unless there is something else introduced into the market. So I think that's where they miscalculated. I think that's where they actually accelerate the free market to where it is right now. And, that's my 2 cents on that. That's more like 75 cents.
Yeah, Mark, you know how we have ratings for movies? We have R movies, we have PG movies, we have G movies. Is there a place you think where with, hey, platform, you can do what you do, but there's gonna be some government body that rates the inherent danger of your platform, and it may be no one under 18 allowed on your platform. And it's up to you to as the platform to verify age, and there's a financial penalty for every person we find that's below that age on there. Is there a place for that, or you think that's getting that's is that too much? I guess what I'm asking is that too much regulation for you to
Well, no,
start to start
again,
rating these platforms?
it's
Yeah, to
since
start.
since as a society, we've already agreed to this. In other words, as like you said, with movie ratings and with the purchase of certain products. Here's the thing. It's if you walk into a theater, which is not as common as it was when you and I were kids, people are
Mhm.
watching everything online, which is
But
an
this
example
is
I want to give
probably
right now.
why also.
What's that?
I said this is probably why also
It's
because
probably why.
yeah, yeah, but
We yeah, when you walked into a theater in 1980, and it was rated R, you had to show ID, you had to be there with your adult parent or your guardian to get in. Period. It was pretty good. Now
mhm.
people have fake IDs, whatever. There's always the ancillary. There's always, ways to get around it. But generally speaking, you couldn't get into a theater unless you were abiding in line with the law. Now if a kid has a password to mom or dad's television set or whatever, they
Mhm.
can go and watch the raunchy stuff. In other words, it's very difficult in those circumstances we're living now to 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 regulate, to really police what someone is watching any place, because anybody could log into. Look, you could have a parent, that says, you know what, now my kid's really mature for 15 years old. Let me log in, and let him or her watch this. And who's gonna, I mean, how do you regulate that? It's
No, no, but I
impossible.
don't. But maybe you shouldn't regulate that. I'm not saying you should regulate that, but at least in that case, a parent is making
Right.
the parent, not a parent, the parent is making the decision.
Yes.
And I
I
think to,
agree.
yeah, too
Yeah.
much today. I think that my fear, Mark, is that it's almost like, and I don't know, man, is the government, is our generation, or even people younger than us now, are they a little bit out of touch about what's going on these platforms, and what type of content is potentially on these platforms? And as a result, they think, "Oh, no, that's the cute that's the cute platform where you have a filter and it makes you look like a rabbit," not knowing that, there's this sexually explicit content on there that
Mhm.
a computer is deciding to push to your child. So I almost feel like, does it need to be, hey, I wish it was this, I wish we could just make it the parents' responsibility. But
Mhm.
I feel like the parents do not know what the danger is. And I don't know whether in a situation like that, the government then has to step in and just say this, and this, or unsafe for children. If you can't do something about this, you cannot market this product to children? Or is that really an overstep? And is it something that you just has to be one of the risks of parenting? And you have to just, you know, you have to just tell your friends, and, parents have to know that this danger's out there and they need to parent accordingly.
Yeah, I think the latter is ultimately, in other words, you were asking me about, do we need a, more federal involvement, regulation, things like that. I'm totally open to that. It's a very complex, terribly complex issue that, in other
Mhm.
words, we can't come up with an answer to on this show. I don't know if anybody can, but it is a terribly complex issue. But going back to the last thing you said there, Bill, is that ultimately it has to come down to parents. It has to come down to parents. I think, in other words, the reality about fentanyl, the reality about online predators
Mhm.
is coming more and more. Look, fentanyl, I think, has kind of hit the crescendo. I think there can't be a parent out there who has like the least bit of involvement in their kids' daily lives that's not aware now of the fentanyl crisis.
Right.
I think we're probably still on the upswing of information getting out to parents, which is still surprising to me, but I think we are still there, about the dangers of the internet and the predatory nature of people. And I think we're still on a
Yeah.
learning curve there. My hope is, look, like everything else when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to government involvement, I am a big fan of small government. I put those words there on purpose. I'm a huge fan of
Right.
small government. In other words, keeping government as small as practical. Not possible, but as small as practical. The 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 least amount of government is, to me, the ideal, because the less government you rely on, the more you have to rely on yourself. When I say yourself, that includes parents.
Mhm.
The more you have to rely on yourself as a parent, which is the most efficient, most direct, most effective way to protect your child from these types of dangers. Not every danger, not, breaking your leg playing football or scraping your knee riding your bicycle, but these types of dangers, drugs, online predators. The parents are the first line of defense. And so, yeah, we need government, we need regulations, but at, again, at the lowest po- uh, practical level. Like I always say, we all of us have to learn, all of us have to learn that we as individuals have to be our own first responders,
Mhm.
not the police. years in law enforcement. You, Bill, 30 years in law enforcement. I'm a big fan of law enforcement. I love the rank and file officer. But just like with traditional crime, breaking, entering, and car theft and assaults and robberies, things like this, police are usually there after the fact to investigate and hopefully find the criminal after get him or her in handcuffs and get him in jail. Of course, not in California, you don't go to jail. But anyway, but the same thing is true with parents with online threats. By the time the police find out about it, often something terrible has already happened.
Of
If
course.
parents can be the front line, the first line of defense, it's much more preventable. It's much more likely that these things won't happen in the first place. Is it tougher now to be a parent than it was when I was growing up? Almost certainly. But it's reality as parents that we have to deal with, especially for people like me with a young child.
Yep. And Mark, I think it's easy as parents to prepare for the threats that we were aware of when we were younger, or the dangers that we encountered when we were younger. These new threats that parents don't necessarily know are out there, I think that's a whole new challenge today, and that's why we're seeing a lot of problems. And as promised, Mark, I'm going to end on this. I'm going to tell a story then to explain to parents how a platform is used to traffic drugs. And I'm going to pick on Snapchat just because, like I said, there's a current lawsuit and that forces a lot of information to come to light. So Snap has a feature called Snap Maps, right? So what someone could do, if I'm a drug dealer, I'm going to create a drug menu, and I'll make it colorful, I'll make it attractive. I'll list 5 or 6 drugs on there that I'm selling and the price, and I'm even going to put a QR code on it to add me as a friend. Okay, and then I'm going to tag it with a location. Mark, I could tag it with a middle school. I could tag it with a middle school. I could tag it with a shopping mall where there are a lot of kids with money in their pockets, and it will appear on every kid who is at that location. It'll appear on their timeline. Whether we are friends or not, it's going to appear on their timeline. So every kid at that middle school will now see this drug menu, right? They can add me right away with the QR code that I put on it to be a friend. And now, once I'm friends with them, the algorithm will start recommending me as a friend to their friends. So, that's what technology is out there now. I think in a study over in the UK that's mentioned in this lawsuit of teens that admit to using drugs, 75% said they get them on social media. So social media has become the number one drug source for teenagers. And then an issue that I think is even more dangerous than that is the sexual predator, like the incident that we talked about when we opened the show today. Hey, we all knew when we were little, if that van pulls up on the street and the door opens, run.
Mhm.
It's hard to do that when it's online today. So, Mark, thanks for joining me and talking about this today. I think this story is going to be a huge story this year. It's one of the biggest challenges in parenting, and it's one of the things that's endangering our children the most. Thanks for listening, people, and please take something away from this, and if need be, change the way you parent and be involved.
Amen. Thanks, Bill.